We at REBA released the 8th in our Transforming Engagement series in February 2024, and we're producing the series in association with Mercer Marsh Benefits. And in this particular report, we explore longer working lives and the impact that that is going to have on future people strategies and employee benefits. If you'd like a copy of the full report that we're going to be discussing in the video today, packed with data and insight, you will find a link to it at the end of this video. Now, to discuss transformation and engagement in the context of longer working lives, I'm joined today by Nick McMenemy, who is partner and digital strategy and markets leader at Mercer Marsh Benefits. So Nick, great to have you with us again for this video.
Debbie. Yeah, great to see you again. Another brilliant report, and it's great to be continuing this conversation with you. So it's good to be back.
Yes, absolutely. Now, what was very interesting in this particular report, probably more than the 7 that we've done before that, is flagging up this really big incoming trend that we can see employers planning to review organizational risks and costs associated with longer working lives, even if many haven't actually even started reviewing at this stage. And my first question to you, Nick, what is it that you see are the key risk costs associated with longer working lives that employers are looking at?
Yeah, it's really interesting that this has emerged as a kind of as a thing for HR leaders to get their heads around, along with all the other things that HR leaders have to get their heads around, right? So yeah, there's a few things that I would say we would be discussing with our clients when it comes to accommodating older workers and extended working life. So the first is around retention of talent, particularly if there's a perception in the organization that succession planning is tricky because people are staying in roles longer into their career. So there's that kind of balance between how do you get new talent to be promoted and excited about the career journey, but also encouraging older workers to have an extended working career. So there's that balance. There's then some of the practicalities of us being older as individuals. So what the physical demands of particular roles, the location where those roles are based, how much physical activity is required, but even things like length of commutes or number of times someone is expected to be in a certain location. As people get older, we need to take that into account. I then think there's something interesting around kind of cultural norms. So it's not impossible to imagine that there could be a 50 or a 55-year difference in age between youngest and oldest workers in an organization. And as we know, cultural norms move on, language moves on. What used to be acceptable in the workplace 20 years ago is no longer acceptable now. So there's a whole piece about how do you make sure that everybody feels included in an organization when there's such a huge age disparity. And then the final thing, and I think we'll maybe cover this in more detail in a minute, but just the cost of providing benefits. So the cost of providing insurance and healthcare for people as they get older, rises considerably. And in fact, some benefits, will not even cover people above a certain age. So there's that cost and risk aspect to consider as well.
So, and I know in the report we've got even more than that, but those are really crucial ones. So that's great that people say we're planning to review this. How are you seeing among your clients, or how are you seeing employers, how do they review? How do they plan to review their HR strategies for longer working lives?
Yeah, I thought it was really striking that there's been over a 200% increase in employers looking to review HR strategies, particularly around extended working lives. So it's clearly something that's made it onto the agenda. So the first I'd say around HR strategies is looking at training and skills development. So the skills and training that somebody picked up 40 years ago may no longer be relevant to the modern workplace, right? Particularly if we see the acceleration of digitization in the workplace and AI. So how do organizations have a strategy in place to reskill and upskill people who extend their working life? I think the second thing is, as we've touched on, is having appropriate and relevant benefits. So the benefits that someone needs as a 25-year-old are not the same someone needs as a 65-year-old, particularly if we look at caregiving responsibilities, as people need support with retirement planning and making sure they've got adequate funding for the time when they do decide to stop working. So there's that benefit design piece. And then back to the job role design. So what is being asked of these older workers? Does the organization need to look at different shift patterns? Does it need to look at the number of times that someone is required to be on site somewhere? So I think there's that piece. But it comes back to our old friend, which is have a strategy in place that is regularly reviewed, basically. So that you can't just set and forget this.
Yeah, absolutely. And another old friend that you and I have discussed a number of times is that employee value proposition. So once again, interesting to see in the stats just how many employers are going to be reviewing the EVP in the light of extended working lives, longer careers, and so on. So what do you think they might be starting to look at in terms of that EVP, and what might change in the future?
I think the big thing, when I was thinking about this, the big thing for me is flexibility. I think to accommodate extended working lives, it's going to be about flexibility and personalization of benefits. So that means as careers and job roles evolve, then the flexibility of work patterns, but also the personalized nature of benefits is going to become really important. Things like paid time off for those that have got caregiving responsibilities. That's just one example, but that needs to be brought into the mix. We've talked before also about CVP, so about culture and value and purpose, and I think that's just as relevant to older workers as it is to younger workers. And linked to that is organizations deliberately having an inclusive environment where older workers do not feel squeezed out. They don't feel like they're dinosaurs. They don't feel that their skills and experiences are no longer relevant. So I think having that inclusive environment for those very experienced members of staff is really important. And then when we come to, again, like the physical demands, so we see employers making adjustments for people who are neurodiverse, for example, whether they need extra time to do things or additional technical support, whatever that might be something that in the value proposition, employers want to consider for older workers too. And then I know your report touches on it, but I think the importance of reverse mentoring. So getting younger workers who already have these skills to reverse mentor some of the older, more experienced workers, I think it will be really important too. It's a great way of ensuring that the skill set remains relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to finish off the section, Nick, it's very obvious listening to you now, but we say it in the report. Really, a lot of this is not just focusing on older workers at all, because many of the things, as with so many DI type strategies you actually put it in and go, hang on, this is actually valid for the entire workforce, and it changes the CVP or EVP for everybody and those building blocks for the younger. So I think it's going to shift for all ages, ultimately.
Exactly right. Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things, focusing now on employee benefits specifically, we asked the question of which employee benefits do employers think are effective at mitigating the risks of an aging workforce. And it's probably a bit of a tough question for them, to be fair, but they ticked, as you would have expected. Coming up top was pensions, that was wellbeing support programs, private medical insurance, occupational health and rehab were the top ones, and there was a list beyond that. And when you and I were chatting ahead of this video, we talked about how do they really measure effectiveness, or are they thinking that makes sense? And if they're not measuring effectiveness, how could they be measuring true effectiveness?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and there's some really great stats in the report. And I was surprised to see how highly rated people's view of the effectiveness of their benefits were. And I suppose if I had a gentle challenge back on that, it would be, well, how do you know? How have you gauged that effectiveness? For us, the answer is yes. We think you absolutely can gauge the effectiveness of particular benefits. And it's back to another of our old friends, which is data. What is the data showing in the organization? Has a new benefit improved productivity? Has it improved sickness and absence rates, for example? Are people getting early intervention from the benefits that are offered rather than going all the way to the point where they have to make a claim on healthcare, for example, or are off for extended periods of time? What is the take-up rate of certain benefits? Particularly employers who have a digital platform to deliver their benefits. What's the take-up rate? How many people how often are people logging in? How often are they making active decisions about the benefits that they choose? How often are they topping up and adding, say, dependents onto different benefits, or benefits that they fund themselves that demonstrates that they're actively engaged with the benefit program. We talk a lot about employee listening exercises. So, how often are the employees surveyed? How often are they specifically asked about the benefits that they got at the moment, or the ones that they think they might need in the future? Employers can do focus groups around that as well. That can be really valuable. So, I do think a combination of, well, firstly, what's the purpose of the benefit in the first place? What is it trying to address? Secondly, what data do employers capture on that? And then what is the data telling them about how effective that those benefits are in driving the behaviors that they're trying to address?
And I think that's going to be more important because some of this is actually future looking. A lot of employers aren't really yet affected by longer working lives, but we know it's coming really, really quickly. So those focus groups you mentioned might play more of a role than backward looking data as well. So thinking about that, Nick, what are some of the conversations that you started to have with clients about what good could look like when you're looking at bringing in benefits or reviewing your benefits for longer working lives? What do you think we're going to see coming in?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I think there'll be lots around, again, back to the personalization piece. I think that there'll be we've already started seeing that trend, but I think it will continue. And I think that the one size fits all approach, even one size fits all for certain cohorts of employee, will continue to move to a much more individual benefit offering. So what do I need as an individual right now? What do I need in 6 months' time, in 3 years' time, as my career changes, as my personal circumstances change? So that flexibility and personalization, for me, is what good really looks like when designing a benefit program. Are there specific benefits that might help extended careers? I think there are. So there will be some health and well-being benefits that can particularly target the health and well-being needs of older workers and people who decide to extend their career. It's just as important that physical well-being is taken care of as well as mental health, and we hear an awful lot about mental health, rightly. But as we get older, the physical changes in our bodies need to be taken into account as well. So it's important that physical well-being is not lost when we're focusing on mental health. I go back to the inclusive environment. So is it a place that I would feel happy to extend my career for 5 years? Do I feel comfortable, included, that I'm adding value, that I'm making a decent contribution to the organization? And then we're back to employee listening again. What do people returning to work, say after a 20-year career break, need if they're going to be working for another 20 years, perhaps well into their 60s and even 70s? So that feels like a bit of a rambling answer, but there are so many brilliant benefits out there. It comes back to what is the objective? What's the people strategy? What are they trying to achieve to accommodate extended working lives? And then at the final part of that conversation is, okay, let's look at the specific benefits that might answer those questions.
Absolutely, very well said. And we'll keep in touch on that, Nick, as we see stuff evolve and develop over the years. So, Nick, huge thank you for joining me for this very quick overview of some of the findings that we saw in the report. Really useful to just explore those some of the key people strategies, CHROs, HRDs, heads of reward and benefits, might be reviewing as they go through the next few years and get some of the why behind the data that we put together in this Transforming Engagement series. Just to remind anybody watching the video, if you want to get a copy of the full report, we have put a link on the closing slide of the video. In the meantime, thanks, Nick. Great to talk to you again.
Thanks, Debbie.